Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound Radio Show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey, I am your host for this show, and this evening I'm actually the only guy here. Jeff had a thing that came up. It's a special Die Hard anniversary screening that he was able to get into. I don't blame him one bit. Quite frankly, I would leave the show for that too, for a single night. I hope he has fun. He should be back next week. No worries for those of you who are fans of Jeff. And I will try not to take up too much of your time. But it's just me tonight, so fair warning. On the card tonight, we have a review of UFC Fight Night 139, which was last night's event. It was an event. It's basically what these events are on FS1 as we wind this down and the UFC just kind of looks ahead to what's going to happen at ESPN. There's a couple of good fights sprinkled. There's a few that overperform. There's a few that just kind of suck. And the whole thing takes about 2 hours more than it should. I mean, this event lost a couple of fights from when we talked about it last week. We lost the flyweight fight between Ray Borg and Joseph Benavidez, which sucked. Looking forward to that. We had a couple of fighters miss weight. These cards are all kind of the same. This thing started at 5 my time, wrapped up around 11, so thankfully it was only 6 hours. There were long stretches where there was nothing. I'll get into some of the specifics when I get into the card more broadly. But, again, there were some good fights, there were some bad fights, there were some that overperformed, there were some that underperformed, and it was just kind of there. I will also be previewing UFC Fight Night 140, which is next Saturday. The UFC debuts in the country of Argentina. They will be in Buenos Aires, and they have Santiago Ponzinibbio, a native Argentinian, versus Neil Magny in the main event. That's actually not a bad fight. That's a relevant welterweight fight. Neither guy's in the title picture, but they're both on the upswing. Ricardo Lamas versus Darren Elkins in the co-main event is also kind of pretty solid. After that, it gets kind of weak. You have Khalil Roundtree against a scrub because anytime he fights someone any good, he loses and the UFC wants to protect him. Guido Canetti. I'm going to get into the whole thing, but it's... yeah. Is that real? No, that's got to be longer than that. Yeah, there's the other two fights. That is, let's see, 3, 5, 8, 10. It's another 12-fight card, which is the average. Occasionally they book 13, and occasionally they actually get 13. More frequently, one of them falls out at the last minute. But I'll be giving that a preview, so... you can look forward to that. And, of course, news of the week. There was a bit there's something I might be retreading ground on, but that was kind of made official this last week that I want to talk about. So, let's jump right into UFC Fight Night 9. This was the UFC's 25th anniversary event. It wasn't exactly the 25th anniversary, but it was close enough. And they had some cool stuff they did on the production side of things throughout this evening. They had the old graphics. They had the Ultiman on the... which is like Boss Rutan, basically. But they had the old bald guy icon in the middle of the cage. They had, the fighter intros, the fighter graphics cards were all the old ones. Which is really a fun bit of nostalgia for those who are nostalgic. I'm not sure the degree to which I am, because as I've famously said, I've been asked more than once, well, what's life without whimsy? And my response is always better. But a lot of people seem to enjoy it, and I'm not going to crap on it. It was kind of fun. I mean, my only annoyance was I like to relay the odds on my coverage. And the odds, whoever's been doing that for the UFC's official website hasn't put it up for the last 3 events before the fight actually airs. Which is profoundly annoying for someone who does what I do. The way I do it. I mean, I'm sure there are other people who do it their own way who do it much better, and this isn't an issue at all, but for me it's annoying. And didn't have a spot for that, so no one got any of the odds updated, but again, minor thing. I just don't like change. Your main event, I am really torn on this fight for a lot of reasons. In your main event, Yair Rodriguez defeated Chan Sung Jung via knockout with the system that I practice in. I got back into, I don't even really want to call it training because I feel that's actually an insult to people who do this for a living or significantly more seriously than I do. I got back into the system I study is American Kenpo about a year ago. In fact, almost exactly a year ago. I'm a little over a year, yeah. And I don't talk about it that much because it's not normally relevant, but occasionally it is. And I bring it up in this case only because the variation of American Kenpo, and there's entirely too many, but such is life, that I practices that essentially the elbow that he used to get this knockout. We call it an obscure back elbow. So if I refer to it as such, that's why. There's a handful of things that I usually use the more generally accepted phraseology and nomenclature on. There's a few that just haven't been brought up or are specific subsets enough that I use what I prefer to use in other circumstances, and if I refer to this one as an obscure back elbow, just want you all to know why. Knocks out Chan Sung Jung with a back elbow. It's not even a back elbow in the traditional sense of the word. 4:59 of the fifth round. Literal last second. Rodriguez ducked under a couple of punches from Jung. Jung was pretty much literally leading with his chin like he does. And Rodriguez, from bent over at the waist, ducking under this, fires an elbow vertically. It's straight up. And hits Zombie on the chin. Zombie never sees it coming. His whole weight's going forward, so as it lands on the side of his jaw, he's actively progressing forward, adding his own weight to the blow. He drops like he got shot. I mean, just flump to his knees, flump face down on the canvas, just done. If you told me he died, I would have believed it the way he fell. Like that was just lights off. This is one of the most insane knockouts I've seen in this sport. I mean, I've seen some crazy knockouts, and there have been some darn good knockouts this year. There have been a couple of really sweet head kicks. Like Eric Anders had a great head kick. I think Marlon Moraes had one this year. I think Moraes versus Rivera was earlier this year. This is the latest knockout in UFC history. It ties Demetrius Johnson for the latest finish in UFC history. Again, Demetrius got Kyoji Horiguchi with an armbar at 4:59 of the fifth round. Rodriguez here with the old knockout. Just want to confirm. Yeah, Rivera and Moraes was in June of this year. I mean, again, Anthony Smith's knockout of Shogun was good. Again, there have been some good knockouts this year. This is probably your knockout of the year. This was insane. I really don't even really necessarily know how to say it other than that. This is the type of thing that should never work when... Let's say it like this. Techniques like this only work under one of three circumstances, to the best of my experience. One, both guys are really good, and something just outside of the realm of normality catches them off guard. This is how John Jones was successful with a lot of his spinning elbows because, again, not a lot of people were throwing him at the time. John caught some really good guys with those elbow strikes because they weren't expecting them, and they were both really good. The other option is both guys really suck. If you watch a lot of low-level MMA, you see not exactly this, but crappy, flaily, floppy stuff. And that, not to say that what Rodriguez did was crappy or flaily or floppy, but random stuff happens more frequently when you have two really crappy fighters just doing really crappy things. The other option, the third one, the one that happens less frequently, is the massive skill disparity. If you have one guy, one fighter, who's really good and another one who really sucks, and the guy who's really good decides he wants to play around with something like this, you might see something of this variety. I don't know which of those three circumstances occurred here because I don't know if both these guys are just really, really good. And evidence tend to suggest that they're not both the level of excellent that you kind of need for stuff like this to really play a factor. There might be a bigger skill disparity between the two than was previously thought in favor of Rodriguez. They might both not be as good as we thought they were in some respects. And that's kind of what led to this. I mean, there's a lot of things. So largely I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. I am not the supreme arbiter of analysis about stuff like this, but in my experience, those are the three circumstances. When you get two guys of medium level or a minor skill disparity between two people, you tend not to see this. I mean, if you want another example, like Artem Lobov, doesn't do really crazy stuff, but when he fights guys who really suck, he beats them, and it's the same kind of basic philosophy. Not philosophy, application of logic. A lot of people saying this is a fight of the year contender. I'm not sure I agree with that. Is this a top 5 fight of the year? Probably. From where I sit right now, there are at least 3 other fights that are ahead of this. One is my fight of the year so far, which is still Whittaker versus Romero 2. Which is just a crazy fight. 2 is probably... I go back and forth on 2 between Tony Ferguson versus Anthony Pettis and Justin Gaethje versus Poirier. Those 2 fights flip-flop that second and third spot up, depending on the day sometimes, because they're both great fights. After that, you might sneak in Rodriguez versus Jung here. 5 being... I don't know what the next one would be, honestly. Depends on some of the criteria. If you want a more technical, high-level fight, you could probably argue Johnson versus Cejudo, too, as the next one up. The reason I'm not as high on this as others, and it's because I thought about it. Like, if all you do is watch this fight once, it's probably number 2. If that was my only experience with this fight, it probably would have been number 2 behind Whittaker and Romero. But I thought about it. And this is not the type of fight that I think holds up all that well on reflection when you want to get really nitpicky. And I do. If you don't, fine. Again, like none of you are beholden to my standards or sensibilities, but you're listening to this show, so I'm going to give them to you, and you're free to do with them what you will. This was a very engaging fight. This was not a boring fight by any stretch of the imagination. These two punched and kicked the crap out of each other. Where it falls short for me is it's a very samey fight. If you watch any 5 minutes of this fight, excluding the finish, let's take that last 2 seconds out of the equation. The preceding 24 minutes and 49 seconds, 24 minutes and 50 seconds is a lot of the same. If you see any 5-minute segment of that, you've seen basically every round outside, excluding the finish, which again is insane. That is a crazy finish. Yair Rodriguez deserves a ton of credit for that finish, because that's a technique that not a lot of people utilize. It's a technique that should be used, at least attempted, more than it is, quite frankly. And in a fight he was losing, and Rodriguez was down... Let me put it... I haven't seen this... let me say what I know. Personally, I had Chan Sung Jung up 3-1 going into the 5th round. 2 of the cage side judges had Jung up 3-1 going into the 5th round. 1 judge had it even. And I think Jung was winning the 5th round. And Rodriguez, down on the scorecards, down the last round of the fight, needing a finish, found one. And this wasn't I know a lot of people are saying this was lucky, and to a degree it is. Let me be clear about that. This was a Hail Mary from Yair Rodriguez, an unorthodox Hail Mary, but that's what it was. And there is a degree of luck when those land. That doesn't mean it's fluky, necessarily. It doesn't mean it's... Again, saying just luck, it is not just the randomness of the universe. This was not a lightning bolt from the heavens striking Chan Sung Jung. This was Yair Rodriguez reading the situation, finding an opportunity for an offensive move, a low percentage offensive move, but the one that was available to him at the time, and doing everything he could to exploit the opening presented, and Jung not recognizing the opening he was given. He was leaving during that scene, walking into it. Again, is there some luck there? Sure. Of course there is. It's fighting. There's always a degree of luck. This wasn't blind. Rodriguez wasn't closing his eyes and swinging. He was tracking Jung. He knew about where his body was. There was skill involved in this. That, again, saying that there was some luck involved should not, I know the way some people talk it does, should not detract from the fact that there was legitimate skill involved from Rodriguez when it comes to this, because he threw that intentionally. To say that he was doing it intentionally and there was skill does not remove the fact that there's an element of luck involved either. Like, these two things are not at all mutually exclusive. Not in this circumstance. There are circumstances where, sure, you can have stuff that's 100% one or the other. 99% of the time, a circumstance is a combination of luck and skill. You can argue the ratio a little bit. There were both at play here, but if you remove either of them, this doesn't happen. Again, if you take Yair's skill out of this, he never throws that, it never lands, Jung wins a decision. If you take some of the luck out of it, Rodriguez throws it, it lands on the chest, Jung blocks it, Jung slips it, Jung doesn't lead with his chin, doesn't actually step as deep as he does, etc., etc., etc. So it's a combination of both. Credit, and you get credit for both, because luck's not always on your side. And you get credit for the skill that you put out. And Rodriguez, in that moment, again, wasn't an accident, wasn't a fluke. He threw that intentionally, and it worked out. A lot of times it won't. The next time he throws it, it probably won't. It did this time. And, again, one of the most insane finishes I've ever seen. Certainly at the UFC level. You just don't see this that often. But if we're talking about the fight in total, excluding the finish, it's a lot of the same. Rodriguez injured his feet or his legs on some of his kicks early, because he does. I mean, Rodriguez is a powerful kicker. That's easily his most powerful weapon, is his legs. His punching's not great technically. He had a better jab here than he'd shown in a while, but his defense was still lacking. His punching just isn't great yet. And that's not to say it can't be, but yet. His kicking game, when he gets away from the stupid spinny stuff for no reason, is quite good. It's very, very powerful. Jung blocked a couple of kicks and seemed to screw up Rodriguez's legs. I mean, Rodriguez couldn't stand at the end of this fight. A combination of physical exhaustion, because he took this fight on short notice up at altitude in Denver, and, again, just damage to his legs and feet. Like, that sucks. And he gutted through it. Again, deserves a lot of credit for his heart. But there was a lot of sameness to the fight itself, and a lot of Jung blitzes, a lot of Rodriguez trying to circle. Rodriguez is still kind of screwed against anyone with a really well-timed double leg. He's kind of screwed against anyone who can time his spins. He threw a lot less of them in this fight. I think in no small part because a couple of times he did spin, Jung smothered him and countered him, which is what you're supposed to do. I think he's in trouble against anyone who knows how to cage cut properly, because Jung pressured him and did a lot of following rather than cutting him off. That kind of let him circle away from the fence. But he can be backed to the fence. He's not as bad as, say, Junior Dos Santos about actually feeling it before trying to circle, but he's pretty close. And someone with a really good double leg, once he's in that position, is going to get him. Jung doesn't have a good double leg. Jung's takedowns are more upper body throws and trips. So that's something, again, stuff that Rodriguez needs to work on. Both men landed on each other a lot. They were both bleeding and busted up. This fight was just... How do I say this? This might be the MMA fight equivalent of a good Michael Bay movie. It's a lot of the same, but it's not boring. Has the occasional really good sequence, but doesn't offer a lot of interest or a whole lot of difference or a whole lot of technical things to watch and be interested in, if that makes any sense to you guys. And again, I said good Michael Bay movie for a reason, because it wasn't as boring as the bad ones, which even when they're just blowing stuff up, you just kind of roll your eyes and go, please get this over with. Again, I wasn't bored watching this fight. I wasn't as effusive as some people, and that's probably because I am very nitpicky about this stuff even when I'm watching it. And again, that's just me. If you loved this fight to death, Godspeed and party on, man. This is the type of fight that I know why people love. I'm just giving you my perspective. Jung came out. Both guys were released from the hospital. Neither one had anything broken, I think. Bermudez doesn't seem to have, again, broken his legs or his feet, which is good. Jung said he was embarrassed. Quite frankly, he probably should be. I mean, for as engaged as the fans were with this fight, when you're winning and you decide that for the last 3 seconds of this fight, I'm going to bum rush this guy, leave my chin exposed. I appreciate the always going for the win, even when you're up. I appreciate not sitting on your laurels. You have to counterbalance that with intelligent fighting. What's the risk-reward here in a main event that I'm winning? And where this could take me in my career next versus engaging in another 5 seconds of sloppy brawling. And that's something, again, that's a tough balance to take. It's something you have to decide in the moment. Jung made his choice. Jung got knocked out, and now he's in a significantly less good spot with the rankings relative to, what he's going to do next. And Rodriguez, despite losing essentially the entire fight, pulls out a Hail Mary. And again, when I say losing, he wasn't getting dominated. I had him losing, but he wasn't blown out of the water. And he pulled it out. Great knockout. Again, knockout of the year at almost certainly. Unless something really crazy happens throughout the last, 8 events of the year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 more events. Unless something really crazy happens in one of those, this is your knockout of the year. And deservedly so. This was a great knockout. I'm not trying to knock that at all. But so when Jung comes out and says he feels embarrassed, and a bunch of people go, "No, why are you? That was such a great fight." It's a great fight for us to watch. He's got to live with the results. And that means he has to live with getting knocked out in the last second of a fight he was winning because he was stupid. Having his title aspirations shattered for for probably all of 2019 now. A guy who's already over 30 in a division that favors the young, trying to make it back to the title. That might never happen for him now. Should he feel embarrassed? Should he be proud of what he accomplished in a lot of ways? Yes, you're damn right. He took a lot of abuse. He gave a lot of abuse. And Yair Rodriguez had to basically kill him to get him out of there. There are things about his performance that he should be proud of. There are things about his performance he absolutely should be embarrassed about. That's a shockingly bad fight IQ to fight the way he did in those last couple of seconds. And I've got a lot of emotional attachment to the zombie. I have enjoyed the heck out of a lot of his fights. And I will in the future. I'm not trying to knock the guy. But let's be realistic about this. It's relatively easy for us to sit back and appreciate guys who go out and go to war like he does and just say, no, you shouldn't feel badly about anything related to this. Meanwhile, this is his job. And this is literally how he provides for himself and his family. He has competitive aspirations that are dashed now. Should he feel badly about some of that? I'm going to say that, yeah, he probably should. It shouldn't be the only thing he feels, and it shouldn't consume him. You should temper that with all the success. You should temper that, of course. But there's a reason that guys who are just happy to be here and happy to go to war like that tend not to become the best. Because when you do badly, you should feel badly. You shouldn't feel only badly, mind you, but again, you should respond to negative stimuli with aversion rather than running towards it. I mean, it's one of the great traps of combat sports that there are some guys who just won't change because they're happy to brawl, and they wind up being moderately successful brawlers who after their career ends, they're 45, have significant brain trauma and nothing to show for it. I mean, there are plenty of some of the best fighters in the world who wind up 45 with significant brain trauma. Much less a lot of just the regular guys. So I hope Jung gets better. I mean, again, he shouldn't be ashamed of this fight by any stretch of the imagination, or even his own performance. He should be critical of it. If you want to get better, you must view what you do critically. In victory and defeat, I mean, Yair Rodriguez should not feel completely happy with this. He was losing this fight pretty definitively. He won, but if you want to get better, look at it critically. And he should, and I hope he does. I mean, I've been down on Rodriguez, and to a certain extent still am. I think there's a lot of potential there. But there's a lot of seasoning that he needs. And I'm curious to see if he's able to do it. I really am. I don't want to sound like I'm just bashing on the guy. So, I don't know where each guy goes from here. Maybe we'll get Rodriguez versus Zabit next, because that's been talked about. I still favor Zabit in that fight. Not as much as I did before, but I still kind of lean his way. Zabit's got a fight coming up, though, doesn't he? Could swear I'd seen that he signed. No, he beat Brandon Davis. I mean, Zabit's looked great, but he hasn't fought all that many top guys. I mean, Shaman Moraes is an underappreciated guy. But other than that, they're trying to bring him along. And I'm not sure. I mean, Yair Rodriguez would be the best win on his resume. I mean, conversely, this Jung win is the best on Rodriguez's resume. Prior to that, we don't count his win over the zombified corpse of BJ Penn. So it was either his win over Alex Caceres, who's a meh fighter, or his knockout of Andre Fili, who's also kind of a meh fighter. So maybe they'll go that way. There's guys for, I'm curious to see what Rodriguez does going forward. I'm curious to see how the UFC handles him. And hopefully those two do fight, because both guys are relatively protected. I mean, Rodriguez went on that big UFC winning streak, and again, the best win was either Fili or Caceres, and he had a couple of fights that I thought he lost. The Charles Rosa fight specifically. The Dan Hooker win was solid enough, but, I mean, Hooker also turns out to have been not all that great as a featherweight and is really good as a lightweight. Then he fought, the first guy who really is good that Rodriguez fought was Frankie Edgar, which is a disservice to him in some respects, because he went from lower end of the pond guys to one of the best, and Frankie just massacred him. So he fought someone more appropriate to his skill level here. He was losing the fight, but pulled it out, and again, deserves a lot of credit for that. But yeah, he'll probably be out for a while because he abused his body in this fight. Jung, probably similar. I mean, both guys took a serious toll on each other, but Jung's title aspirations are pretty much done. He's going to be fighting, lower top, like ranks, say, 13 to 23. I know the UFC official rankings ended at 15, but that range is probably where he's going to be fighting next, and he's probably just kind of done as a really elite level fighter between the years and the injuries and the setbacks. He'll have some good fights, but I think he's kind of done as far as that goes. But thankfully, again, main event was solid. Crowd enjoyed it. Most of the fan base enjoyed it. Thankfully, God, because this card, man. The top two fights really delivered. In your co-main event, Donald Cerrone defeats Mike Perry via armbar, 4:46 of the first round. Mike Perry is a stupid fighter. I don't know Perry personally. I can't speak to his level of intelligence as a human being. There are some very smart people who are stupid fighters. There are some very stupid people who are very smart fighters. The two are not correlated almost at all. Mike Perry fought a stupid fight. He kept trying to clinch, he didn't go to the body, and he started slowly. Donald Cerrone is a slow starter. Donald Cerrone can be bullied. Donald Cerrone is a little bit soft to the body. You have to take advantage of that if you're going to be successful against him. If you look at his string of losses, all the guys who beat him did those things. Perry, again, they did a lot of clinching, some trading of knees, just a little bit of back and forth like that. Perry got a takedown. Cerrone played his guard game, and Cerrone's guard is solid. And if you don't know what you're doing in someone's guard, especially someone's guard who knows what they're doing, he's going to catch you. He threw up a triangle attempt that Mike Perry kind of postured through. He tried again. Perry He-Man'd his way out of it. He switched to an armbar. I mean, really what played into Cerrone's favor here is that Mike Perry's default defense to these things was to try and muscle his way out of them. So he's going for an armbar, and Perry picks up and tries to slam him. Unfortunately, all this did was help, because he kind of slammed Cerrone on Cerrone's own face. All it did was extend his own arm and drive it deeper into Cerrone's crotch. You want to get your elbow past their hips. That's where all the pressure is. Now, I mean, you're still kind of in danger because if someone's got some real torque on them, they can break your forearm. Frank Mir and Tim Sylvia being a famous example of that. But mostly once your elbow's past their hips, you're going to be safe. Trying to slam the way he did, if it doesn't loosen their grip, especially if your arm's already extended. I mean, if your arm's bent and you try to slam, you can kind of slam and put more weight down on it, and there's other reasons. The way he did it, just offers very little value unless you knock them out with it. Cerrone cranked the armbar. Perry tried to step around, but it was way, way too late for the proper defense. Had to tap. This is Donald Cerrone's 21st UFC win. That gives him the most wins in the UFC ever. That broke his three-way tie with George St. Pierre and Michael Bisping. This gives him the most finishes in UFC history at 15 or 16. I want to say 15. Yeah, 15. At 14, he had a three-way tie with Anderson Silva and Vitor Belfort. He now stands alone atop a couple of significant records. He brought his son his 4-month-old son into the cage with him, his family, his grandmother. Really great moment. If you followed Cerrone's career, the guy's been up and down. He's had great runs. He's had rough runs. He's had wars. He's had quick victories. He's been finished quickly. But dude's been around for a long time. He's been in the trenches. He's never given anything less than his best. It was a really, really great moment to watch. Afterwards, he said he's going to go back to lightweight, which is probably a good idea. His welterweight career was middling. I mean, he loses the title fight with Rafael dos Anjos, moves up to welterweight, wins 4 in a row, all of them finishes, fights Masvidal and gets finished in the second round, fights Lawler and gets beat over 3 rounds, gets knocked out by Darren Till, beats Yancy Medeiros, loses decisively to Leon Edwards. And the guys he beat at welterweight were kind of the old guard. Patrick Cote, Rick Story, Matt Brown, guys who had been around forever. Once he started fighting a better quality of welterweight, again, Masvidal, Lawler, Till, Edwards, he struggled. Lightweight might be a better fit, and if he's got at least try it. He might decide it's still no good, but it might be worth a try. He called out Khabib because he wants to fight for the belt. I think Khabib would smash him. Look, Cerrone's takedown defense is not bad, but we're also talking about a guy who does a lot of forward pressure in Khabib that Cerrone doesn't respond well to. We're talking about a guy who can start fast if he needs to, and Khabib can. And we're talking about a guy who puts damage on you. And Cerrone can fight through damage, but he takes a lot of damage. That guy gets marked up and bloody. If he wants to go back to lightweight, I don't like him fighting for the belt right away just because you have 2 other contenders. You have Tony Ferguson and you have Dustin Poirier. He should not jump over both of those guys given their recent runs. If he goes back to lightweight, put him in the cage with Justin Gaethje. Let's all just stand back and watch 20 minutes of carnage before one of them falls over. As soon as he moved up and Gaethje signed, I said it's a shame we'll never get Cerrone and Gaethje if Cerrone stays at welterweight. Cerrone's going back. Gaethje versus Cowboy books itself. I favor Cerrone in that fight, quite frankly. But it's a reintroduction for him at lightweight. Gaethje's a legitimate top guy. Not a top 5 guy, but a top 10 easy. Let's have that fight. It's nothing but human carnage, and that's what I want to see. So, a lot of credit to Cerrone, a lot of congratulations to him because, again, this is a guy who's been around forever and has had some great fights, I don't think he's ever had a bad fight, really. He's had some truly great ones. He's had some that were just kind of there but weren't bad. He's had some memorable finishes. He's been finished memorably a time or two. The guy's a veteran. He's one of the best fighters to never win a title in the UFC. Seeing him get to stand in his hometown with his 4-month-old son, standing alone atop 2 UFC records that are serious records, it was a great moment. Genuinely great moment. And MMA doesn't have a lot of those. Not like that. There's a lot of guys like Cerrone who just want to get those records, have something in their head that, one more, I just got to do this and then I'll be done, and they just get killed over and over again. And Cerrone got to have that great moment. So good for him, man. All right, this is where we get to the UGG portion of the card. Germaine Durandamy defeated Raquel Pennington via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Pennington missed weight by 3 pounds. She weighed 138, so 2 pounds over for a non-title fight. Raquel Pennington looked bad. I mean, she just got backed up a lot, did a lot of clinching but didn't do anything with it, got hit a lot, just did not look in good shape, and some of that happens. And look, missing weight is not a good thing. Missing weight by small increments, I think we all, again, I don't like it. Nobody likes it. When it's something like, my theory is if it's less than half a pound, you should just round up if you're an athletic. You should round down if you're an athletic commission. Or at least if it's, 0.3 and below, you should round down. But that's just me. If it's half a pound or so that you miss by, We all kind of roll our eyes at you, tell you to prepare better, but we all also kind of, I think, have a reasonable understanding that weight cutting is difficult, especially for people who have fought a lot, and sometimes this happens. If it happens frequently, change weight classes. But we don't have, I think, the same level of vitriol that we used to, and I think that's for the better, all things considered, especially for, again, that if you're less than a pound, I think the MMA fandom and culture has adopted a more measured response to that. When you miss by 2 or 3 pounds, like, that's a real problem. Something went drastically wrong. I mean, if you take a fight on short notice, like really short notice, and you miss by something like that, we all kind of go, okay, took it on really short notice. If you have a weight cut that is changed, like if you're prepping for a fight in, say, 5 weeks, and you wind up taking a fight in 3 weeks, it throws everything off for your weight cut, because you have it scheduled and regimented to hit the mark at a specific time. If that shifts, especially if you've already started a lengthy cutting process, it can screw things up. Didn't have any of that. This was always the fight. This was always the fight on this card. You miss weight by 2 pounds, 3 pounds if you want to be a stickler, and I kind of do. That's a lot. She didn't look in good shape. She didn't look interested in the fight. Germaine Durand to me, again, 30-27, pretty clearly. I was shocked Durandamy didn't go back to the body. She hurt Pennington with knees to the body in the first round and didn't really go back to it all that much. I don't know what you do with Durandamy. This wasn't a good fight. It was just kind of there. But she's back at bantamweight and is around, I suppose. Pennington might need to just take a break from MMA because, I mean, she looked like she wanted to be anywhere but in that cage. And after the beating that she took from Amanda Nunes, her heart might not be in it, man. And if your heart's not in it, you shouldn't be fighting. That's dangerous. Again, this isn't... I'm not grandstanding. I'm not taking a more, some kind of ethical stance about it. The only people who fight should be those who really have their hearts in it, because I value the romantic notion of desire over ability, and no, it's genuinely dangerous to go in there and half-ass a fight. Now, maybe this was there were things going on that we don't know about. This was a one-of. I don't think she'd ever missed weight before. No, she'd never missed weight before. So, again, maybe there's things, maybe this is a one-of, but all things considered, I don't feel like she should have been in that cage. She was not even really competitive. This was just physical abuse she didn't need to take. At lightweight, Beneil Dariush defeated Thiago Moises via unanimous decision, 30-25, 30-25, and 30-26. Total dominance on the ground from Dariush. I had it 30-25. I gave him 10-8s in round 2 and 3. No finish. Moises was able to defend. Dariush needed a win badly. I mean, he was on an 0-2-1 skid. He was finished by Barboza. He fought to a draw with Dunham. He was finished by Hernandez. I mean, he hadn't won since 2016. Dude needed a win. And he fought to get a win. And, I'm not going to fault him for that. Not a very entertaining fight, but a lot of dominance from him, and a lot of, Moises not being able to do anything about it other than defend rear naked chokes. Your probably coming out party of the night goes to Macy Barber, who defeated Hannah Cyphers via TKO in the second round. Barber is being positioned as the next big thing at strawweight. She's got pretty good kickboxing, wicked elbows. She cut up Hannah Cyphers pretty badly. She had 2 or 3 cuts, a badly split lip, a couple of cuts, one under her left eye, one on her forehead. Like, once she got bleeding, uh, Macy just teed off on her. There was some brutal ground and pound finish from the leg drag position. This, again, a bit of a coming out party. And she had to overcome a touch of adversity because Cyphers was there for the first round of this fight. Cyphers was landing stuff. She wasn't there to just be a punching bag. She fought. I don't know that Barber's, this was kind of... This wasn't a gimme, because, again, Cyphers came to fight, but Cyphers also did this on short notice. She was supposed to fight somebody else. Maya Stevenson. And Cyphers took this fight on relatively short notice. I don't know what Barber's gonna do, but this was a fight that was designed to give her an opportunity to showcase the best of herself, and she took it. And did, so good on her. Mike Trizano defeated Luis Pena via split decision, 29-28 for Pena, 29-28 for Trizano, 30-27 for Trizano. I don't know how you get 29-28 for Pena. This was just kind of a there fight. It existed. I don't know what to think of either of these guys because they both debuted at the Tough 27 finale card. They both won on that card. These two were supposed to fight for the Tough crown, but Pena got injured. Trizano won that season of Tough and then immediately fought someone else from that season of Tough. Pena won on that card against another house guy and now fought. So I need to see them against guys who actually belong in the UFC on their own merits, not because they were on Tough. Again, it was a decent enough fight, but just kind of there. On the prelims, Ashley Yoder defeated Amanda Cooper via split decision. Kind of a crappy decision. I thought Cooper had it. There was two 29-28s for Yoder, 130-27 for Cooper. I think I was 29-28 Cooper. Again, don't agree with the decision at all. This is Yoder's first win in the UFC after going 0-4. I don't know. I mean, I don't see either of these women really being a player in the division. In our regulatory screw-up of the evening, Bobby Moffett defeated Chaz Skelly via technical submission off of a Darce choke. This was crap. Let me tell you why this was crap. First of all, this was a bad stoppage, all right, to begin with. Moffett gets a Darce choke, gets the arm position on Skelly, and kind of is looking to roll, walk the legs in, because I know in MMA there's a frequent number of guys who finish this without lacing the legs, but you kind of need the legs. You kind of need to tie up their lower body and really compress them. You can do it with just your arms in proper rotation, but it's a lot harder. And a lot of the chokes you see guys get like that in MMA come from guys who are already beaten. You know, there's been a lot of physical abuse. So we had him in the proper arm position. Now, the choke was there. This wasn't a bad attempt. But the ref checked one of Skelly's arms once, and it was kind of loose, and he stopped the fight. Skelly immediately looked at him and went, "What the hell, man?" The ref thought Skelly was unconscious. Skelly wasn't unconscious. That's a bit of a bad stoppage. I mean, you do want to check the arm, but there's a lot of grappling scenarios where you try to relax. Because the more you tense, the more your heart beats, and especially if you're being choked, that means the faster blood is pooling in your brain. Well, not in your brain, in your head. Because, again, if you choke, you're cutting off the blood supply, is just backing up, and the faster your heart beats, the faster that whole thing goes along, and just the act of tensing muscles makes your heart beat faster. It's actually one of the foundational principles of DDP yoga. You can do yoga poses, but if we're tensing muscles, our heart beats faster, we burn more calories. Yay. So, when you're being choked, depending on the specifics of the position, you do want to try and relax rather than panic. Skelly was in a position to relax. He relaxed. The referee checked the arm only once. You want to check it a couple of times. You don't want to be really late with it. Again, that's a rough thing. Because you really don't want to be like watching a guy unconscious going into convulsions while you just kind of stare at him. But you also do have to consider the entirety of the position. And maybe if that position develops a little bit more, Moffat gets the full-on technical submission and does put him to sleep. That's possible. I'm not trying to sell Moffat short here, but bad stoppage under the circumstances that it happened. Here's where this gets even worse. We had replay for this event. We had the new rules, which include replay. So when there's controversy around a finishing sequence, you can look at it on replay, decide if you want to stick with it or not. The referee who made the call went out, talked with one of the commission officials, looked at the monitor, and decided to uphold his own call, which was then announced as a TKO rather than technical submission. This was just a complete clown fiesta. There's a few things about this that I think need to be addressed. One, if we're going to have instant replay, and we should, let me be clear about this. We should have instant replay on these things. We really should. If we're going to, there's a few things that need to be hammered out. One, the referee in cage who made that call should not be the one to review it outside on replay. Because you are less inclined to overturn your own decision. There are at least 2 refs for every fight. You have a ref in the cage that does the majority of the work. You have one on the outside who does the final check before the fighters enter the cage. Have the guy on the outside be the one who reviews these things. Not the guy who made the call. If you want to confer a little bit and take their opinion into account, fine. But that same ref should not be the one looking at the replay making the call. 2. We need some kind of clear language about what's going on. Again, it's one thing to say we have instant replay for these scenarios, which we do, which is good, but what's it take to overturn a decision? I mean, some cases are going to be clearly one way or the other. The majority of them are going to be borderline. I mean, this was a relatively clear circumstance to the majority of those of us watching it. It was a bad stoppage. But if this is going to be the standard that it must be clearer than this, then, we need to figure out exactly what the criteria is. I mean, the NFL has a specific criteria for overturning calls that are challenged. I forget what the exact language is, but it's something like you need what is it? Not quite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, but you need definitive evidence to the contrary. And that's simply the standard they've chosen to adopt, and it means that every time they review a call, you need serious evidence to the contrary, and everyone knows that that's the standard you need. We can argue about whether, and then there's endless debate about whether or not an individual instance qualifies or not, because people are always going to argue those things, but we have an accepted standard by which these things are measured. Is there that for MMA replay? Because I don't think there is. If there is, no one was told about it. I wasn't. Commentary didn't tell me. The UFC broadcast didn't tell me. They just said we have instant replay. There's no actual specified procedure in place for what it means to overturn a decision, what you need to overturn a decision. Or anything along those lines. And quite frankly, you need that. I wish you didn't. I exist in this weird spot where I hate overly pedantic things, but trying to find the line between something that is overly pedantic and something that is necessarily specific can be a bit fuzzy. I think we need more clear procedures and language and standards about what's going on with instant replay. Because we have it now, but what does that actually mean? What are the refs looking at? What are they looking for? Is there a standard of criteria that you need to overturn the in-cage decision? Do you need significant evidence to the contrary? Because if you need significant evidence to the contrary, this one might have stood up under a stringent enough criteria. But we don't know if there's a criteria or what it is, if it does in fact exist. Now, if I'm Skelly, I'm appealing this because it's a mess. But, again, this was your regulatory screw-up. If we're going to have instant replay, and I think we should, I think we need to really sit down and figure out what the steps are, what the criteria are for overturning the referee's in-cage decision, and I think you need another ref who's deciding whether or not to uphold or overturn it, not the guy who made the call in the cage. None of those things were present on this. Let's get that sorted out, guys. We kind of joked that this is the 25th anniversary of UFC 1 in a lot of ways. Our next fight looked like a fight out of UFC 1. Davi Ramos submitted John Gunther with a rear naked choke at 1 minute 57 seconds of the first round. John Gunther isn't good. And Davi Ramos is good. Davi took him down and Davi Ramos is a genuinely great grappler. Dude was the 2015 ADCC champion in his division, which he won with his opponent was in seated guard, and he was kind of standing over him. And if you watch a lot of grappling, you do get some of that seated guard stuff, kind of the crab position. Because you're looking for entries, it's a thing. It doesn't mean the guy on the bottom was, in a bad spot. And Davi just kind of jumps over his guard into a flying armbar and taps him with it. It was nuts. You can find it on Twitter, I think. You can find video of it. And look it up, because it's crazy. Especially in the finals of something like the Abu Dhabi Combat Club. And John Gunther was just nowhere near his level. Nowhere close. Davi just runs over him. Should move on to bigger and better things. Devontae Smith knocks out Julian Erosa in 46 seconds. Just a really solid 1-2 from Smith to Erosa. Dropped him, finished him on the mat. Solid stuff from Smith. I don't know where he goes from here, but, he's here and scored a big win. Eric Shelton defeated Joseph Morales via split decision, 29-28 for Shelton, 30-27 for Morales, 30-27 for Shelton. Weird scores, but it was the kind of fight that, I don't know, I'm not sold on 30-27 from Morales, but there was some good back and forth stuff. It was the average flyweight fight. There was a lot of scrambles, there was a lot of constant motion, and that's all going away in the near future, so enjoy it while we can, guys. And kicking everything off, Mark De La Rosa defeated Joby Sanchez via split decision, 29-28 for Sanchez, 29-28 for De La Rosa, 30-27 for De La Rosa. This was a meh fight, just kind of there. Alright, again, this card had some yeesh moments, had some stretches of just bad stuff, had a few good performances, and one very engaging fight, so all things considered, a fitting enough anniversary card for the UFC. Thank you to everyone who followed along with my live coverage or read the report after the fact. Much appreciated from you guys. Again, I don't know why you support me, but I'm glad you do. I hope one day to actually earn it, so thank you. Alright, next Saturday, we have UFC Fight Night 140. Man, I am not doing a full breakdown of that main card. I'm just not. It's not good. So, I'll go in depth on a few of these, but main event, Neil Magny and Santiago Ponzinibbio. relevant fight. Both guys are ranked. Both guys are kind of on the upswing. Magny. Yeah, 2 in a row. His last fight was the Dos Anjos. His last loss was against Rafael Dos Anjos. Beat Carlos Condit, knocked out Craig White. Craig White took that fight on short notice, man. I mean, that was supposed to, and he just got smoked. That was supposed to be Magny and Nelson. Garner Nelson, sorry. More specific. Ponzinibbio's on a pretty good run as well. Only lost twice in the UFC, and he's on a 6-fight winning streak. 7? Yeah, 6. Yeah. Again, relevant fight. Very relevant fight. I'm torn on this because Magny can be hit, and Magny reacts badly to being hit. And Ponzinibbio can hit. The counterpoint to that is that Magny's takedowns, especially from a body lock, are really good, and Ponzinibbio can be crowded. The more distance this is, the more I kind of tend to lean towards Ponzinibbio. Magny's got a decent enough jab that he's been working on, but he kind of leaves himself vulnerable to the counter, and Ponzinibbio will crack you on a counter. I'm going to go with Ponzinibbio, but this is a very close fight. This is a really good fight. I just don't like Magny's defense against Ponzinibbio's offense. Could be wrong, again, but going with Ponzinibbio. Ricardo Lamas and Darren Elkins is a fight. Both men are coming off of losses. Lamas is on a 2-fight losing streak. He got knocked stiff by Josh Emmett. And then lost to Mirsad Bektic. That was a split decision. Shouldn't have been a split decision. That was pretty clearly a Bektic fight. Elkins coming off of a loss to Alexander Volkanovski. Prior to that, had a really good winning streak that was just kind of snapped. I kind of like Lamas here. I mean, Elkins is awkward. Lamas will try to kick him a few times. Probably will kick him a few times. If they stay upright in the clinch along the fence, Elkins has a lot of advantage. But, I mean, Ricardo Lamas is actually more engaging as a fighter off of his back than he is standing up. Again, I'm just going to go with Lamas there. Again, not completely sold on that, but if Elkins wins, it's going to be the typical Darren Elkins. I get my ass kicked for the first round and then kind of come back from that. Again, Khalil Roundtree is fighting Johnny Walker. This is a gimme. This is a gimme for Roundtree, who they had pretty high hopes for, and he got beat. They gave him a couple of gimmies. He lost, then he got that overturned, then he beats Gokhan Saki. Again, he should win this fight, but they can only baby this guy for so long. Cesar Ferreira was supposed to fight Tom Breeze. Instead, he now fights Ian Heinisch. Probably some weird pronunciation for this guy's last name. Yeah, this has Ferreira written all over it. Ferreira's legit. And he's on a really good run. He's 5-1 in his last 6. Yeah, so Ferreira probably takes that. Guido Canetti and Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera is coming off that win over Luigi Borin. Vera's had some pretty marked improvements over his last few fights. Canetti beat Diego Rivas. He's 2-2. This seems like they're setting up Vera to have a pretty good win, not to because Vera's Chilean, and they're in Argentina, so they're kind of hoping for loose regional association. I like Vera there. Cynthia Calvillo she's defeating Poliana Botello. Yeah, Botello's 7-1, 2-0 in the UFC, but nah, man. She's kind of here to get Calvillo back on track after Calvillo had a stupid fight against Carlos. It was so stupid. She out-grapples Carla Esparza for the whole first round of that fight, then spends the next 2 Next 2 rounds getting outstruck by Carla freaking Esparza. That was so brain dead. That was such a brain dead performance. This is her get well fight after that thing, and she'll probably do it. Then on the prelims, we have Michel Prazeres and Bartosz Fabinski. Fabinski's kind of a grinder. He's 3-0 in the UFC. But this is the best guy he's fought, and I don't think he's going to out-wrestle Michel Prazeres. I think Prazeres is going to beat him. One of our other last flyweight fights ever, Alexandre Pantoja, who is 3-1 in the UFC, only lost to Dustin Ortiz. It's a shame, man, that they're axing that division. Fighting Ulka Sasaki. Sasaki's a decent kind of up and down fighter. Again, he wins, he loses, he wins, he loses. Pantoja should win this. Umberto Bandene fights Austin Arnett. Austin Arnett sucks. Hang on, let me make sure I'm remembering this guy properly. Because if I am, and I'm 90% sure that I am, Austin Arnett was part of one of the worst fights I've seen in the UFC. A couple of them. Yeah, he had that terrible fight with Brandon Davis. He got smoked by Corey Sandhagen. He lost to Hakeem Dawodu. That was it. That was just a terrible fight. Because Sandhagen's the guy who actually has a future. He beat Uri Alcantara. Yeah, Austin Arnett, man, it's kind of a waste of space. Umberto Bandene should beat him. Laureano Strapoli fights Hector Aldana. I don't know anything about either of these gentlemen. Aldana, I want to say, has fought in the UFC before. Yeah, he got knocked out by Song Kanan after competing on Tough Latin America Season 2, and Strapoli is... Oh, he's Argentinian too. He's another Argentinian fighter. He's making his UFC debut here. Yeah. They're kind of giving him a winnable fight to be the local guy, so okay. I'll go with Aldana. On Fight Pass, we have Devin Powell and Jesus Pinedo. Powell has gone 1-2 in the UFC. Broke a 2-fight losing streak by beating Alvaro Herrera. Pinedo is Peruvian? Yes, he's Peruvian. And is making his UFC debut. I will go with Powell, but he might be there as a sacrificial lamb. And kicking everything off, we have Nad Narimani and Anderson Dos Santos. Dos Santos is Brazilian. Narimani is English? Yes, he is English. He won his UFC debut, okay. He had just kind of a there fight against Khalid Taha. Fight Night 134. I don't remember that fight. I covered it. I know I saw it. I do not remember it. And Anderson Dos Santos is making his UFC debut. I'll go with Dos Santos. Why not? Although, watching the reaction that an Argentinian crowd would have to a Brazilian getting knocked out in MMA would be hilarious. Because they would love that. This whole event actually dodged a major bullet earlier last week, apparently. There was a relatively major soccer tournament that had its originally scheduled date a little earlier in the week, but it was delayed due to rain. And if they had just pushed it to this coming Saturday, UFC's Argentinian debut would have been in front of an empty stadium an empty arena because, sorry man, ain't nobody going to this event if there's a relatively large soccer tournament finals going on. That just ain't happening. So they seem to have dodged that bullet. Thankfully. But that is this coming Saturday. That will be the 17th. I will have coverage in the MMA zone of 411 Mania, so stop by, say hello. Always appreciated. Alright, news. Dana White confirmed that we will have TJ Dillashaw dropping down to 125 to fight Henry Cejudo for the flyweight title at UFC. They had given that. Hang on, I had it. They had an event that they were lining up for that, I seem to recall. 233. Which will be that one in California. Okay, yeah, it hasn't been signed, but they're looking for that one to be the main event for 233, so okay. I mean, that's the direction they're going. I don't like this fight. However, I can give you a few reasons why it's happening. Why it's happening the way it's happening. First of all, TJ Dillashaw wants to be a two-division champion because it's just now becoming a thing that matters almost not at all, or significantly less than it used to, and he wants to do it before it becomes really, really passé. And then he wants to... I don't like TJ. He rubs me the wrong way. But TJ wants to become a two-weight world champion. And the UFC wants to give him the chance to try, so... I think that's part of the reasoning. I think the UFC is trying to send off the flyweight division with a title fight. I think they will just announce this will be the last flyweight title fight for the foreseeable future. They will fold the division, but they want to go out with a title fight rather than with another fight pass prelim fight being the last one. Which is ironic considering that's the way the division basically started, but whatever. Their mismanagement of that division is documented at this point. Not to say there wasn't an uphill battle to begin with that weight class, given the UFC's audience, because there was. The way they handled it was improper, and again, I think that's relatively well documented. And there were and again, there's issues of does the actual marketplace and fan base even care? A lot of factors. Their handling of it was one of them. But I think they're trying to give it a bit of a send-off. I think this is the only way the fight is really competitive. I don't want to sell Henry Cejudo short, because he's a tremendous athlete, a really, really good fighter. I thought he lost the DJ rematch, but doesn't mean he's not a good fighter. And I give him almost no chance of beating TJ Dillashaw at bantamweight. I don't give pretty much anyone at bantamweight much of a shot at beating TJ Dillashaw right now. I mean, maybe Cruz. And maybe Moraes could catch him early, but on the whole, nah, man, that's his division. And if he loses something in the weight cut, then Henry has a chance to win. TJ has never in his life had to cut to 125. He might lose something in that weight cut. A lot of guys do, and a lot of guys have. Just that first time they cut down, something's not there. They're not the faster guy anymore. They don't have the same power they used to. Their cardio is not where it used to be. Whatever. A lot of things. And it's a potentially competitive bout at flyweight, whereas at bantamweight, it's pretty heavily favored for Dillashaw. Almost comically favored for Dillashaw, considering how good Cejudo is. I also think that the UFC might be trying to stick it to DJ a little bit. Because if TJ comes down, beats Henry Cejudo, and I favor him in this fight, even at flyweight, I favor him. If he comes down and beats the guy who, controversial or not, ended the reign of Demetrius Johnson, then everyone can kind of point to no, DJ would have lost earlier if he'd fought TJ, ignoring the fact that matchups make fights much more so than MMA math does. But they'll get to point to that and kind of, diminish his legacy because he's not with the UFC anymore, so they're going to do that. Again, let me be clear. Is that the only reason? No. Do I think we should consider the pettiness of the UFC office? Yes, we should. If the bantamweight champion beats the flyweight champion to become flyweight champion, I mean, I said it as soon as they started floating TJ versus DJ. They wanted TJ to go down, win the belt, and say that weight cut sucked, I'm never doing it again, drop the belt, and the UFC just go, you know what? We gave this a try. It's not working out. No more flyweights. I said that a while ago. I think that's still the case. And I think in this instance they're just going forward with it one way or the other. If Cejudo wins at flyweight and retains the belt, they'll strip him of it, fold the division, and let him jump over deserving contenders at bantamweight to fight TJ at bantamweight. I mean, they are screwing at least 3 other bantamweights right now by going through with this. Because you got Marlon Moraes, who's, in my estimation, the deserving contender. You have Cruz, who holds a win over TJ Dillashaw. You have Moraes, who's 1-1 with TJ and is the last guy to beat Moraes and has only lost to TJ at bantamweight. So you have 3 contenders right there in the division, just kind of getting screwed over by this. So the UFC can try to do a super fight that no one actually thinks is a super fight. But, again, that's the direction they're going. I imagine TJ wins because I may not be a fan, but TJ is an excellent, excellent fighter. If he gets 2 more title defenses under his belt, he could become the best bantamweight ever. I think he's still behind Cruz right now as a matter of course, but could he become the best bantamweight of all time? Yes. That is a very, very high. That's even probable at this point. That is probably going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years. As he winds up edging out Dominic Cruz as the greatest bantamweight of all time. To date. I mean, that's what that means. All time is 2 right now. Not necessarily encompassing all of the future. All time only includes time that has passed. Now, he will very likely go down as the best bantamweight ever. Certainly one of them, if not the outright best. And so again, the fact that I'm not a fan doesn't, makes not one iota of difference about his actual fighting ability. So that's being targeted, and we can all say goodbye to the flyweights. There's a lot of people out there that celebrate that. I don't. I like the flyweight division. I know it gets some crap, but I think it's a talented division. I think there's a lot of talented fighters in that division. And sadly, it's just... it's not given a lot of its due. Partially because Demetrius was not a very engaging champion to the casual audience, and the casual audience is the majority of the audience. The UFC didn't go out of their way to try and promote DJ. Now, let me be very, very clear about that. That doesn't mean they didn't promote him. That doesn't mean they didn't promote him. That also doesn't mean they didn't badly promote him. The UFC promoted DJ the same way they promote everyone. They gave him a couple of decent shots in big spots, but if the fighter doesn't connect on their own, they're not going to go out of their way to push you. The UFC doesn't... It's very rare that the UFC goes out of their way to push someone with promotional effort. More they try to see which fighters get over on their own and then push them after the fact. They're not as much about making stars as they are giving fighters the largest platform to be stars on. And not everyone's going to be a star like that. And that's fine. Not everyone is. Such is life. But again, I think there were things that they did with Demetrius that they should have tried with him, if nothing else. But so again, you had DJ just running over all of these guys, a lot of whom were very good fighters. I mean, John Dodson's a really good fighter. Was at the time, still is pretty good. Joseph Benavidez is a good fighter. Seems to have regressed after that layoff, but the turnover at Team Alpha Male probably plays into that. Tim Elliott's a pretty good fighter. Had some weird up and down losses, but is a pretty solid fighter. Who was that other guy? Yeah, Wilson Hayes, not so much. I mean, he stopped Henry Cejudo in the first round of their first fight. Henry's a darn good fighter. I thought he beat Henry in their rematch. And Henry got better between those two fights. I mean, again, were there some scrubs on there? Sure. Chris Carriasso, bit of a scrub. John Moraga wasn't ready. I mean, Ali Bagiratinov was on a really good run when DJ beat him. You know, again, were there a few meh fighters on there? Sure, but there were some darn good fighters in that division. And I think there's a size issue. I mean, America essentially created a sport that partially rewards immobility on the front line of a football field. You know, if you're... I don't mean to completely sell short the athletes there, because they have very quick feet. They have there's a lot of inside hand fighting for position. They're not giant. You can't be a 300-pound guy off the couch and do that. But you're meant to be big and you're meant to not move. We have a size thing in this country. And flyweights are small guys. And there's a giant misconception about, sure, Demetrius is 5'3". And just because I'm, 6'1", and outweigh him by 100 pounds, I can beat him. No, Demetrius Johnson would beat you within an inch of your stupid life. The average person has no earthly idea what goes into professional fighting. The average person thinks they're a good fighter. They are not. If you think you are, again, I bet you can find a gym within 10 minutes drive time from wherever you sit right now, listening to me. There's several MMA gyms around me. None of them are world class. None of them really have guys in the UFC, but there's several that I could drive to in, between 10 minutes and 30 minutes. Several. If you think you can fight, go down to one of those gyms, give them money, and they will train you, and you can see how much you don't know. But because you'd rather believe that you're, because you're bigger, that it conveys some kind of inherent value, and we like seeing bigger things for some reason in this country. I don't know. Again, I don't get the entire culture behind this. I don't know what shaped it or molded it. I'm not an expert on that, but I can certainly observe it. And we just don't really appreciate small things, which is odd considering how big of a star Tom Cruise is. Tom Cruise is like 5'4", but I don't know. But anyway, the division's going away. There's reasons for that. It was mismanaged. There's not a market demand. It sucks. I mean, the UFC released a bunch of flyweights over the last week. That's one of the other things that needs to be brought up here. The basic policy right now for the UFC seems to be, if you're a flyweight and you lose your fight, you're going to be cut. If you win, you have to go up to bantamweight. And that sucks for a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys who are good competitive flyweights who will not be competitive bantamweights. There's some who will probably surprise me too, but there's a lot of guys who are just going to lose the opportunity to fight for the biggest, most stable MMA organization on the planet. Again, it sucks. But that's the direction they're going, and I can't blame the UFC. Again, I've made my pitch for why I like the division. I've made my pitch in the past for it. I stand by everything I've said in the past. But there is a reality to the market that I can't ignore simply because it annoys me and runs contrary to my personal interests. There is not really a market for flyweights in the UFC right now, in basically all of the United States. I mean, Bellator doesn't even have a flyweight division. If there's no market, how mad can I be at the UFC for cutting the division? I don't like it. No, sorry, I can be as mad as I want. I can't be irrational about it. I know why they're doing it. I think it diminishes the overall product. But, I'm not going to pretend that I don't understand why they're doing it. Because I do. Okay, what else do we want to... So again, you had a lot of guys who got cut over the last week. We'll have more cut over the next few weeks as that division gets phased out. Again, I think the only flyweight fight at all being discussed for 2019 is Cejudo and Dillashaw. There's only 3 or 4 more for 2018. Again, they're just going away with the division. I think that's pretty clear. They haven't made it official yet, but because it's been so widely speculated about by now, and there hasn't been if there was a big uproar from the fan base, they might have reversed course. There hasn't been. It's going away. It sucks, but it's going away. The UFC signed Chad Mendes versus Alexander Volkanovski for UFC 232. That's a darn good fight. That is a darn good fight. Let's see. Paige Van Zandt is going to get a bit of a gimme bounce-back fight for the first event on ESPN+. She's fighting Rachel Ostovich. Really, can we pander anymore? Hey, here's 2 pretty girls that are going to... Oh, God. I mean, they're both... Let me be clear. Both Paige Van Zandt and Rachel Ostovich are fighters. They both fought. They've both won. They've both lost. But there's an aesthetic they're very clearly going for there. John Jones wants to fight Brock Lesnar still. Wants easy money, man, and Brock's easy money. If you're a good fighter, Brock's pretty easy money, especially if you're, John Jones or Daniel Cormier. I think that's going to be it, actually, for news. Check to see if there's anything that's going to break. Yeah, sorry, I just saw a gif of that finish from last night. That elbow, man, from Rodriguez. Whatever else I want to say about that fight, and I said it, wasn't terribly impressed by it, all things considered. It was entertaining and needed to be, but that is a thing of beauty of a finish, man. That is a wild, wild finish. I think that's going to be it for this show. Alright. Thank you for listening then. Oh, one last thing. We saw a few of the promotional videos for UFC 231. Boy, are those generic. And that's a crying shame because those top 2 fights are excellent. That is a great main event. Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega is one of the best fights in all of MMA, regardless of weight class. And Shevchenko versus Joanna is one of the best women's fights you can make. And sadly, at the moment, we just have a very, very generic piece of promotional material. So I wanted to lament that. Alright, let me see. This Tuesday, Mark and I will be reviewing Illumination's The Grinch. They take on the classic Dr. Seuss story of how the Grinch stole Christmas, assuming I can find a ride, because my car needs a new clutch and is therefore not drivable at the moment. You can listen to last Tuesday, Mark and I reviewed the most recent season of Voltron, Legendary Defender, the Netflix series. Really, really good show. You can hear our full thoughts on this season. Mark and I, and occasionally Robert Cooper, have reviewed every season thus far. Boy, did I get roped into that. I did that real briefly here before I close. I started doing that. That whole thing started because I'm a nice guy, which is weird, but because they were Mark and Robert Cooper were going to review the first season after it dropped, and this was back when we were on Blog Talk, and so had to go at our pre-scheduled time. And Cooper was running 30 to 40 minutes late, so Mark just said in a group chat for a lot of the people who share common interests, "Can anybody help? I don't want to talk to myself for 40 minutes." And I had seen the show and said, "Sure, I'll help you kill time." And I stayed on for that show, and then I just every season review since, it just kind of I come back for it. Started because I'm a nice guy, now I'm contractually obligated. Story of life. But that's where you can find me on Tuesday. Again, Saturday I will have coverage of UFC Fight Night 140. That should be an event. Geez, the one after that is that crappy card in China at like 4 in the morning. That is not a terribly compelling card. I mean, Ngannou versus Blades, I'm just not looking forward to that fight. I mean, Ngannou, kind of fell off really, really hard. But he might win their rematch, because he won their first fight, but Blades is better than he was before. I'm not sure the degree to which the same is true of Ngannou. Alistair Overeem's back. He gets kind of a gimme against Sergey Pavlovich. Li Jingliang is fighting. His last fight was the Matthews fight, right? No, Daichi Abe. Okay. Song Kanan fights Alex Morono. A lot of the usual, contingent that show up for the Eastern Asian cards. Wei Zhang, Shiri Kondo, Xiaonan Yan, Wu Yanan. Song Yadong's fighting. Good for him, man. I joke about him, but he's 2-0 in the UFC and beat the crap out of both of those guys. So we'll give a full preview of that next week. Next Sunday, again, we'll review UFC Fight Night 140, and we'll preview Fight Night 141. Because every week, every Saturday in November, every one of them. Thank heavens for the fat paycheck, otherwise I don't know what I'd be doing with my life. Alright. I believe that's it for me. Thank you all for listening. I know there's a lot of MMA podcasts, and you keep choosing this one, so thank you for that. God bless you. I don't know why, but you do, and I'm appreciative. Let me see. Yeah, again, back next week. Jeff will be back next week, so you don't have to listen to me talk to myself. Until then, thank you all very much for listening. Stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.